In May 1924, two wealthy students from the University of Chicago kidnapped and murdered a 14-year-old boy, Bobby Franks, in what was dubbed by the media as the crime of the century. The culprits, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, carried out the crime not because of psychopathy, but as an intellectual exercise. They believed that their superior intellect would allow them to commit the perfect crime, and that their motive absolved them of any guilt. Both men grew up in the affluent Kenwood neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. Both were seen as child prodigies, skipping grades in school, and were acknowledged polymaths. The two knew each other socially, but while at the University of Chicago, they discovered a mutual interest in crime, which cemented their friendship. Leopold was also a devoted follower of Nietzsche, the German philosopher, whose theory of superior men justifying the existence of the human race has been consistently misunderstood and twisted by people like the Nazis. He managed to convince Loeb that they were above the laws set out for ordinary men, and the two embarked on a minor crime spree of theft, vandalism, and breaking and entering to validate their theory. Moving on to more serious crimes such as arson, they were upset when a lack of local media attention for their antics failed to materialize. Seeking to have their Superman status confirmed beyond doubt, they set about planning the perfect crime. At the time, they were just 19 and 18 respectively. After months of careful consideration, the two decided on the kidnap and murder of an adolescent. In a sadistic subplot, for their own amusement, they devised a ransom demand, accompanied by a complex communication and delivery system, despite having no intention other than murder. The weapon to be used and disposal options had already been arranged. This done, Leopold and Loeb began stalking potential victims, mainly around the Harvard School for Boys in Kenwood. They eventually settled on 14-year-old Robert "Bobby" Franks, the son of a wealthy Chicago watchmaker. Loeb was the boy's second cousin and a neighbor, and Franks had even played tennis at the Loeb home. The plan was activated on the 21st of May 1924. Tailing Franks in a rented car on the boy's way home from school, Franks was persuaded to get into the car by Loeb to discuss a tennis racket. What happened next is not entirely clear, but it's believed that Leopold drove and Loeb struck Franks several times in the head with a chisel. With Franks dead and out of sight on the floorboard in the rear of the car, Leopold and Loeb drove to the prearranged spot near Wolf Lake in Indiana, 25 miles south of Chicago. There, at nightfall, they concealed Frank's body in a culvert and returned to Chicago. By the time they arrived, word was already out that Franks was missing. Leopold telephoned Frank's mother, calling himself George Johnson, and informing her that the boy had been kidnapped and ransom instructions would follow. After mailing a ransom note, burning their clothing, and cleaning up the rented car, they settled down for an evening of card playing. The following morning, Leopold resumed calling the Franks' house, this time with the elaborate instructions for ransom delivery. When word arrived that Frank's body had been found, it put an end to his cruel baiting of the family. The two murderers destroyed the typewriter on which the ransom note was typed, and a blanket that had been in contact with the victim, then went about their lives as if nothing had happened. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing. And please consider supporting my work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description. Thank you. An intensive police investigation began, with a reward attached. For some reason, probably arrogance, Leopold began blabbing to reporters and sharing his theories with detectives. As with anyone who attempts to insert themselves into such an investigation, he became a suspect. Police were further interested when a pair of eyeglasses with a specific hinge, sold only to 3 customers in Chicago, was found at the murder scene. Leopold was one of those 3, and a lame excuse about possibly losing them during a bird-watching trip convinced no one. Leopold and Loeb were eventually summoned for formal questioning on the 29th of May. An alibi, claiming to have spent the night driving around with 2 women, whose names they couldn't remember, was demolished by Leopold's chauffeur, who informed police that Leopold's car was being repaired on that night, so could not have been used. Faced with these facts, Loeb abruptly confessed, blaming Leopold for everything and stating that he was only driving the car. When Leopold confessed, he reversed their roles, but other than that, the details were broadly the same. Both admitted that it was a thrill kill, fueled by their delusions about Nietzsche's Superman and the desire to commit the perfect crime. Leopold further admitted that the crime had not given him the fulfillment he hoped for. The trial was a media circus. Loeb's family hired the renowned criminal defense attorney, Clarence Darrow, at a cost of $70,000. Darrow took the case, as he was a staunch opponent of capital punishment. In the event, the trial was fairly unremarkable, since it was an open and shut case. Both men pleaded guilty and sought mitigation in psychiatric or personality defects. The only memorable event was Darrow's summing up to the judge, 12 hours in all, in which he emphasized the youth of the defendants, the unfairness of the U.S. justice system, and basically laid it on thick. The judge, perhaps bludgeoned into submission by Darrow's speech, spared Leopold and Loeb from death, instead sentencing them to life plus 99 years for the kidnapping. 12 years later, Loeb was murdered in prison by another inmate, James Day, who claimed that Loeb had made advances towards him. The evidence seemed to suggest that it might have been the other way round, but with sympathy for Loeb in short supply, Day got away with his claim of self-defense. Leopold was a model prisoner, assisting in the education of other inmates and participating in a trial for an experimental malaria treatment. He wrote his autobiography, entitled Life Plus 99 Years, published in 1958 as part of an ongoing campaign to win parole. Despite criticism for a perceived lack of remorse, he won his freedom that same year. With the help of a Christian charity, he moved to Puerto Rico, becoming a medical technician in a hospital. Earning a master's degree at the University of Puerto Rico, he taught classes and rekindled his interest in ornithology. He died of a heart attack in 1971, at the age of 66. There have certainly been more gruesome crimes than those committed by Leopold and Loeb, but the arrogance behind their thrill killing is the most unsettling part. Having seen off the fad for eugenics in the 1920s and the atrocious regime of Nazism in World War II, we must always be on our guard against the anti-human tendencies that lurk within some members of the human race.